Jeff, the morning mindset call that I um, host every morning, and just a time for us to walk, maybe collaborate on some ideas to kick some things around, mainly having to do with mindsets and probably something to do with growth, which is the focus of most of my work. So one of the traditions that I have with, okay, it's slick. You may get a live view of Jeff wiping out on the ice. One of the traditions that I have established, I suppose, with Java with Jeff is that on Fridays, I read through James Clear's 321 Thursday email. As I say that out loud, that sounds kind of weird. So let me give you a little background. James Clear is the author of Atomic Habits. It's a book you should know. He has an email, a subscriber list, sends out an email. If you're like me, you probably subscribe to a billion emails. It's literally the only one I read that I subscribe to, or the only one that I subscribe to that I read. I think I said that wrong. But what I do for our Java with Jeff audience is that because I get the 321 Thursday email in my inbox, I think around 5 o'clock on Thursdays, 5 p.m., I read it the next morning for Java with Jeff. And so I read through it. So the idea of 321 is 3 ideas from James Clear, 2 quotes from others, and 1 question for you. So I read through this email and then just leave it open to the audience. What do they want to talk about? That's the question. Hey, put it in the chat. Which of these things do we need to unpack further? And so that's how it goes. So I read the 321 Thursday email on Fridays, but last week being the holiday week in the U.S., I didn't host Java with Jeff Thursday or Friday. And I forgot about the email yesterday on Monday. So I read it today. And off the top of my head, some of the main ideas in the email, whether James Clear's ideas or quotes, let's try to summarize it a little bit here. One was the idea of presence. This popped up in a Java with Jeff episode a week or so ago, maybe. The idea that one of the most precious gifts that we can give is our attention, our presence. And I talked about the fact that when I was putting together a talk years ago, I haven't given this talk in a while. Maybe I should bring it back. Be good timing. I did this talk a lot around 2016, 17, 18. And it was called Ego versus Empathy. It was about mindset, certainly, but also about communication styles. It also got into marketing. A lot of the audiences that I spoke to were concerned with marketing. But as I was researching for ego versus empathy, one thing I kept running across was the idea of charismatic people. Who are charismatic people? What makes a person charismatic? And an example that would come up over and over was Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was often, or is often, viewed as one of the most charismatic people in the world. And so these examples or these articles would go on to explain that when Bill Clinton walked into the room, the energy of the room changed. Of course, you could argue, hey, he was governor or he was president of the United States, whatever his position was at the time. So of course it does, but it was more than that. And they would go on, these examples, stories would go on to say that if you um, if you were at one of these events or whatever, you were talking to Bill Clinton, it was like he and you were the only people in the room. No one else mattered. No one else was even there. It was this complete focus and presence from him to, he was giving this to, excuse me, whoever it was that he was talking to. Construction equipment. So that was one of the aspects, one of the things that made him seem so charismatic, just that personal connection. So that was one of the ideas. Another idea was the reality that for many of us, the the pursuit is more interesting, more entertaining, however you want to say it, than what comes after the pursuit. And so, in a way, I think I'm not sure that's even a human trait. I mean, I think it is a human trait, but I think it's more basic than that. But also, it's a little bit horrific to think about. But the idea was, what if we what if we designed or framed the things that we do around the journey? I think is how James Clear put it. So I thought that was an interesting idea. Um, I'm forgetting most of the rest of it, so I'll just jump to what we really kind of dug into on Java with Jeff this morning was positioning. And the question was, it was at the very end of the email. One question for you. Question was something like, what can you do to position yourself for success even when things don't go your way? Um, I think that's a really interesting question. I think it's a really necessary question as we think about growth. You know, one of the things that I did for a while was I raced mountain bikes, off-road bicycles. If you're not familiar with the term, so race mountain bikes. And I don't know. I mean, I'd never been an endurance athlete before. I played basketball. I played baseball for a long, long time. Sorry, I got to climb over this barricade. It's pretty out this morning, but I was not an endurance athlete ever. I decided to start doing this for some reason. I enjoyed it. I really still enjoy mountain biking. Um, don't want to race anymore, to be honest. But one of the things that you learn really quickly in lots of types of racing, but certainly mountain bike racing, is that um, you can prepare, right? You can train, you can get your equipment ready, you can do all the things, which is all positioning, right? It's setting myself up for success. We talk about that with young people, right? Whether we're a coach or a teacher or a parent or a mentor, an employer, whoever it is, how do we set someone up for success? And a lot of times that has to do with helping them play to their strengths and all kinds of things like that. But um, it's always a good question. In mountain bike racing, you can do all those things. But then the gun goes off and you start going. Maybe it's raining, maybe it's snowing. Maybe there's a water crossing, a log crossing. There's a million things that can go that are somewhat out of your control that can make things go sideways instantly. I mean, I've had races where I broke a chain. I've had races where had flats. I've had races where I broke a derailleur, which is the little thing that allows you to change gears. There's all kinds of things. Races where I didn't feel well. Races where it's cold, where it's hot. All kinds of things that you don't have any control over, which may or may not, but more times than not in our stories are the things that the reasons the things did not go well for us, did not go the way we wanted them to. But you're in a race. So you've got to overcome that. So what do you do? You've done everything that you can to prepare. So what do you do when things aren't going your way? I think I talked about this. I don't know if it was here or Java with Jeff. I think it was Java with Jeff. One of the ways, working with coaches over the years on this, one of the ways that you win a race is that when you get on the climb, everybody's got to do the climb. You go up this hill, this mountain, whatever, and you're pedaling up and up and up and up. A couple minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, depending on the terrain where you are. Maybe it's relatively short, but the way to win a race is that you pace yourself and you push yourself up that mountain as you're pedaling or up that climb, as you're pedaling up that climb. And when you get to the top, you get close to the top, you keep going. A lot of people, when they start getting towards the top, they start to relax. They start to let off. They start to run out of gas. And so they lose momentum. If you can maintain that momentum, now you're starting to beat them. But then the real key is once you get over the top, once it's always this last hard push right to the top. And then you kind of get to this flat part, and maybe it's flat, and the trail is relatively flat from there. Maybe it's downhill on the other side. But what almost always happens is people suffered up the climb. They started to lose their momentum towards the top, and then when they get to the crest of the hill or the mountain, whatever the climb, they start to sort of relish the fact that they got there. Right? They back off. They take a second or two for rest, for breath, for maybe a drink, whatever. And what my coaches always kind of instilled in me was that's not where you break. That's where you pedal even harder. You keep going because they're losing momentum. You're gaining momentum, right? That push over the top. And it's a place where you can make up ground. It's a place where you can create a gap. That's a place where races are won. But still, what happens when things aren't going your way? The question, it's about pivots, I guess. It's about how do I make some little change when things aren't going my way, when things are getting difficult? How do I make some little change, or how do I anticipate that? For me personally, over the past a month and a half, 2 months now. I was doing, I do consulting work around, you put innovation in quotes. I'm often the quote unquote fractional chief innovation officer organizations, but I often have a little bit different approach than a lot of people with those kind of titles, where my view is very human, and it's really a cultural view. And so I do this thing where I talk about and help organizations build a culture of growth. It focuses, it's holistic, focuses on people, organization, and your clients or your customers, whoever they are. So it's sort of like triple bottom line. But one of the things that happened when the government shut down here in the US is that I had my biggest client press pause. And that was unexpected. That was definitely not things going my way. It was huge, huge financial hit that, frankly, I'm still trying to figure out. Right? Things in that sense are not going my way. So how do I position myself? And part of how I position myself, or part of what I'm doing, all right, this is real-time feedback, is taking a step back and saying, okay, well, who do I know that may need a strategy session? As a, for instance, I'm doing a lot. I got one actually here in a couple of hours. I'm doing a strategy session, which I happen to love. But what are the things that I can maybe fall back to? It might be past clients. Sorry for the heavy breathing. A little bit more difficult walk today. Maybe how do I fall back to things that I've done in the past? How do I jump forward to things, accelerate into things that maybe I didn't plan until Q1 of 2026 or Q2 of 2026? I think it's about the pivots. We were talking about the positioning on Java with Jeff. Somebody brought up the idea of playing basketball and rebounding. And having lived in Chicago for a lot of years, 20 years, something like that, all the way through the Bulls' heyday, Chicago Bulls, the championships. Dennis Rodman, he wasn't there for all of them. Came over from the Pistons, but I think that was this. Like maybe he'd had one more stop before the Bulls, but anyway, he was an incredible rebounder. He was an incredible lot of things. But he's an incredible rebounder. He wasn't the tallest guy, wasn't the biggest guy, wasn't the strongest guy, none of those things, but he was really, really good at getting in position. And I think, one of the things that we really have to, one of the lessons that we really have to take from Dennis Rodman and his rebounding skills is that he got in position because he could anticipate how the ball was going to come off the rim. In some sense, that's physics. Right? Angle of incident and angle of reflection. But his ability to see things unfolding and anticipate the way that the ball was going to come off the rim allowed him to position himself. And of course, all of his wiliness helped too. But I think our lesson is, how can we go forward, head up, eyes wide open, and see what's happening, anticipate what's coming next? We don't have a crystal ball, a magic 8 ball. For those of you that haven't figured this out, it's not it's not real. But how can we go into everything head up, eyes wide open? And really, the mindset piece of that is go into it with the mindset of I'm going to work, I'm going to see, I'm going to adapt, I'm going to anticipate, I'm going to respond. In Java Chef, I talked about your personal growth, your relationship growth, your business growth, or your work or your career. I think that's applicable in all of those scenarios. So maybe that's it. Head up, eyes open. How are you going to respond? How are you going to see and understand and respond? All right. I'm almost to the coffee shop. It's right across the street. It's busy over here. Got school delays and school cancellations today. It is slick. I'll give them that. Um, without talking about the way it was when I was a kid, walking to school uphill both ways, barefoot in the snow. Um, it is what it is. So kind of busy over here. So I'll be back tomorrow. I don't know if this helps in any way. I don't know if anybody even saw this or will see this, but thanks for playing in the sandbox. I'll see you tomorrow.